Jerry was shelling us so badly. My mate in front of me, the corporal, he got hit, and that killed him, and I got the blast myself.
2 or 3 days after we were taken prisoner, the Japanese came in and took a group of us further up into the mountains to remove and dismantle booby traps. And in the process of doing that little job, I was blown up.
Two Mirage fighters strafed the ship with a 30mm cannon, and I and other colleagues, I was peppered with the shrapnel, and some of it took my eyes out.
One minute I was looking at the parcel. I then, I think, remember hearing a vague sort of click, but it was as if in a windowless room somebody had suddenly flicked off the light switch and turned the sound down. It just suddenly went black and quiet.
So I was edging along the wall, and I slipped. My friend told me, I don't remember nothing about that. He said I went over, and I turned around, and the scaffold pole landed on a mine, and all the debris came through the end of the scaffold pole, and I was the one who caught it.
Basically, it was my level of fitness that saved my life, because my heartbeat went down to between 4 to 6 beats a minute. So if I hadn't been as fit as I was, I'd have been dead.
Having watched the Astra collide with the 16-ton Scania, the Astra spun away and the Scania crossed to my side of the road, and the very last thing I saw was the wheel nuts of the front near side wheel passing across in front of my vehicle.
At St Dunstans, it's been a long tradition to give a new St Dunstan a Braille watch. Now, this is very important. It doesn't work every time. First of all, psychologically, it's a real boost because, first of all, it means you can tell the time. It's something you could do before you lost your sight, and within a minute you've learnt how to tell the time. And so that's quite a help. And secondly, of course, when you wake up, you can tell whether it's night or day.
St Dunstans was established in 1915 to care for the men and women blinded as a result of the First World War. St Dunstan's care has continued with men and women blinded as a result of the Second World War, and then conflicts since then, conflicts such as Northern Ireland, the Falklands crisis, the Gulf War, peacetime accidents, and right up to the present day.
Some of the trainees, when they come here, they haven't got a clue what to expect. Most of them are quite nervous about what's going to happen to them when they're here. They think it's going to be a very military-type organisation, when in fact it's not like that at all. It's very relaxed, very informal, and very soon they settle in to their training course and seem to go on in leaps and bounds. The majority of them, they go out of here with confidence they didn't know they had.
When I first got into the battalion, I actually served as a rifle companyman for about 2 years. Then I moved over to another job in Northern Ireland, and after that I ended up being a patrols platoon, and that consists of going in first and then bringing in the rest of the battalion by marking the DZs. Then I actually achieved my aim by ending up as an instructor down in the depot, teaching recruits for the last 2 years before they found out about my eyesight.
I remember with Dave, one of the things that really it brought everybody to tears up here. We actually got him sat down at a new piece of equipment, new to us. It had just literally come onto the market, and it was a CCTV, which enhanced the print for Dave. Dave, for the first time in I think it was about 7 to 8 years, read his mail, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house, and it was that punch the air syndrome. It was, yes, this guy now knows what we can do.
Before I came to St Dunstans, I couldn't actually read and write. Not that I couldn't read and write, due to my eyesight I couldn't read and write. And since I've been coming to St Dunstans, I can now read and write. I've actually sat 4 exams on the computer, which before, in my past, I'd never, ever dreamt of using a computer. And St Dunstans have actually taught me computer courses, and I've made quite an achievement with the computer itself.
When they leave, generally most of them can touch type very quickly. They can all do word processing. A lot of them like to use the graphics packages because in conjunction with the magnification programs, they're able to see what's on the screen. So they leave here hopefully being able to use the computer as well as a sighted person.
All the equipment I've got at home, which St Dunstans have provided for me, it'll be a bit more in my own environment, and I want to be able to do word processing work. Yeah, I actually stopped doing fitness when I started to lose my eyesight due to the fact that I started to hurt myself. Since I've been coming to St Dunstans through the PTI staff, I can actually feel safe in the gym, and there's always staff there. You're not allowed in the gym or on your own. And I do fitness twice a day, which is quite good. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it up when I go home.
I think we're in the driving class now, aren't we? I was 16 years old when I joined the Army, and I joined the Junior Leaders Regiment, Royal Artillery, at Bramcote in Nuneaton. In 1980, I had an opportunity to go to the King's Troop and learn how to be a mounted gunner. I did a course for 4 weeks. I then returned back to Junior Leaders, and the option they gave me was to join 1 RHA, which is also part of, obviously, the Royal Horse Artillery. So I was able to ride horses with the Field Regiment for most of my Army career. I started losing some sight in my right eye when I was in Bosnia in '97 during Op Resolute 2. Like most soldiers, you haven't got time to go sick because you're so busy. So I sort of dismissed it and left the idea. I'm returning back to England. I'd totally lost my sight in my right eye, and my wife made me go sick. They then diagnosed me as having an infection in my optic nerves. The rest is history, really.
He'd had huge problems with his sight. His sight had deteriorated. It had totally gone. I think it was about 3 times over different periods of time. He'd gone from sort of somebody having the best Christmas present in the world, i.e. getting your sight back, to the fact that, bang, it's gone again.
I said initially I had a specific interest in riding horses. Within the first week, they got me down to the stables here at Rottingdean, Jenny's Yard, and introduced me to Fen. And from there, we sort of bonded, and we get on great. We go on the gallops and the downs, and it's brilliant. The only drawback is I can't see the views, or I can't see how badly now I ride. When you're on a horse and you're blind, you can feel the horse moving. You can feel it you can feel the horse responding, for example, from a walk to a trot, from a trot to a canter, and then obviously to the gallop. But you know the horse's movements. If a horse trips or stumbles, you can feel it through the horse's body. Basically, I'm gluing myself to the horse and being part of it. And in all intents and purposes, I'm actually using Fen's eyes. And I think she more or less knows that I can't see, and on her back, I become part of her, and I look through her eyes. And, well, up to now, she's looked after me. My aim is to carry on as normal, not only for myself, but for my family. I'm now, with the training at St Dunstans and the help that they've given me, nothing. There's nothing that can be thrown at me that I can't do through my disability.
Dave? I was in hospital for a month before I came to St Dunstans because I suffer with epilepsy. And when I came to St Dunstans, Leslie, my rehab worker, we got on the CCTV, and I was able to write a thank you card back to the hospital, thanking them for the amazing work that they've done for me. I used to get real bad epileptic fits, being at home, staying in my flat by myself all the time, and just put stress on. And since I've been here, my fits have cut right down, and I feel much, much more happier.
I think Gary finds when he uses the computer that he's able to relax and forget some of his problems, he feels that he's doing something that he never would have been able to. And he puts his thoughts down on the computer, and I think he finds this very beneficial. He'll sometimes come up and use the computer in the training room, like on a practice session, when there's one of the trainers around who can give him some help, or else he'll use the computer in the green room, or there's some in the trainees' lounge as well.
I think one of the most shocking things for me was Gary's low self-esteem when he came to us, and lacking in confidence to a huge degree. But also linked to that, as linked with quite a few visually impaired people, not all, was even the way he carried himself. He's not the guy that you actually see today. He was very, very self-conscious going out anywhere. He was actually quite stooped in his posture, where now you've got this 6 foot, goodness knows whatever, who's actually walking tall again. We even actually had to get the physio in because his posture and his spine was very badly affected. He was getting back cramps, he was actually getting pain to a huge degree in his lower spine. And we really looked at that, and that was purely achieved by mobility, believe it or not, to actually get this guy with his shoulders back, utilising the long cane and affecting his posture to actually get him going forward. And he hasn't got back pain now, and he's actually a lot more upright than ever. Amazing.
When I came to St Dunstans, I've never ever done wood turning before, and it was put on my training programme. And the first time I done it, it was such a great sense of an achievement to be able to feel it and think that I made that. And so I had a few more lessons, and I decided that I wanted to make a trophy for what I call it the Ogden Cup, because all the people in the house, they play competitions all the time and they don't seem to have anything to play for. So I thought if I made a trophy, it would give them something to play for and want to win it, and hold the cup for, say, a month or however long until the next competition. And this is it here. First of all, I made the bottom, the plinth, and then I polished it and shined it up, and then we put another piece of wood on the lathe and made the top part. It took me about 6 hours to make, 6 different lessons, and it feels great to give something else back to St Dunstans, to be able to be remembered. And I made this, and I'm so proud of it. I've never ever made anything like it before, and it just feels so. It makes me feel 100 miles high, because it is just amazing that I've made this.
I thought it was the end of the world, obviously, after I had been blown up. One had no concept of what blindness meant at that time. All I could think of was that I was going to be a father in 5 months' time, and I knew I'd never see my children, and that was the hardest pill to swallow at that time. The first time I heard about St Dunstans was when somebody came to see me in hospital, and he leant over my bed and said, "I'm from St Dunstans," and I'm afraid I looked very blankly at him because unfortunately I'd never heard of the organisation before that time. The big question, of course, is what job can you do as a blind person? I spoke fluent French. My father was a simultaneous conference interpreter, and so I thought, well, sitting there using your head and your mouth surely would be something well within the competence of a blind person. So I went to university in Belgium for 2 years, the School of Interpreting, and although I had the skills, it was very hard to find a job. And when I came back to London, I think I had one freelance job. But by then, St Dunstans had offered me the post of Assistant Public Relations Officer. So I accepted without any hesitation, and I've been very lucky ever since. I was walking around a man-made lake in Belgium one day and saw this advertisement for a club nautique, which was a barge moored at the quayside. And so I went on board and said, what goes on here? And they said, oh, well, we're an activity centre for handicapped children. And I said, well, I'm handicapped, I'm a child at heart, can I join? They said, yes. they let me sail and do a bit of canoeing. There was the sun, the wind, and so from that I had to use my senses to learn, the direction I was going in and to learn to feel the wind with your face. And so I was beginning to learn to use my body to make up for the lack of sight.
I first heard of St Dunstans when I was lying in my hospital bed, and a chap called Ray Hassan came to visit. He gave me a talking clock, which proved to be a great benefit to have that at my bedside whilst I was in the hospital. I think from the time I started at St Dunstans to the time I left St Dunstans, my level of confidence had changed immeasurably, particularly in terms of mobility. I feel St Dunstans did a great job in giving me some basic skills to prepare me for the future. In terms of having given me typing skills and mobility skills, I felt far more prepared for going to get a job in the outside world. I started doing some computing at St Dunstans, and they then provided me with a computer which I used in my first job after I left the army. And that gave me a basic interest in computing, which I then followed up by going to Glasgow University to do a master's degree in information technology, then progressed on to my current job as technology officer, where I'm working constantly with computers and computer networks and advice and training for visually impaired people who are working with computers. I've been entered for an award called the Unsung Heroes Award for the year 2000. It's an award for, in my case, for work I've done towards raising money for charity, and particularly my participation in the Marathon des Sables. The Marathon des Sables is an idea that a friend of mine from my young officer's days, Major Rory Ainsley, came up with. He's already done the event twice before and decided that he wanted to do it a third time, but wanted to do it slightly differently, and offered to guide me around the event. It takes place in the Sahara, and it's roughly 150 miles across all sorts of terrain, ranging from rocky plateaus to sand dunes. This year it was a total distance of 235.5 kilometres, and it's staged over 7 days. The only thing that the organisers provide for you are water every 10 kilometres and a tent to hide out the sun at the end of the day. St Dunstans certainly has helped us out in the last period since I've lost my sight in terms of financial help towards the mortgage, or if we've required a new carpet or a new fridge or something like that, then they've always been willing to, if not pay everything, pay a share towards covering the costs for that, which has been a great benefit in terms of the financial side of things.
Rehabilitation officers for the visually impaired, or ROVIs as we call them in-house, their nickname, they are qualified individuals who've done a very long training course, and during that training course they've covered all sorts of different aspects of visually impaired practice for people, namely assessments. And during that assessments, what they actually try to do is go through everything for that individual. So the prime concern for the person might be mobility. He may not have got out of his house unless he was escorted by somebody. Yeah, that's the key to get them going. It's also a key for the training to be successful. If somebody can get an achievable task under their belt, it opens so many doors for them. And it is very difficult for people because the main concern for them is confidence, and a rehabilitation officer gives that person the confidence. So they are very much a key person within this unit, and also out in the community as well.
Now, would you prefer to make tea or coffee?
Coffee, please.
Coffee, right, okay.
Something that can be as simple as making a cup of tea, for somebody who's visually impaired, becomes a profound and very, very daunting task. It becomes quite scary, especially if you've actually hurt yourself, scalded yourself or whatever. So during that time we actually go through the different types of equipment that person can use, the different aids and gadgets that person can use, and this is what's gone through with the rehabilitation officers.
We went into the kitchen and we done some safety aspects of the kitchen, and we started off by cooking basic lasagnas, mashed potato and things like that, and now I can cook almost anything. I've cooked curries, poached fish, and I've even started to skin fish and debone fish. And it's just like, I never thought I'd be able to do it.
It's nice, isn't it?
It smells nice.
And there we are, smoked haddock, morning. Brilliant.
Very good.
Well done. Have a good meal.
Thank you.
After St Dunstans was established in 1915, it really led. It was the centre of innovation. And today, St Dunstans is a centre of excellence. And we aim to try and enable people to lead as normal a life as possible, to return to their homes and their own communities, and to go and work in just the same way as anybody else.
I was 16 when I joined the RAF, did my training at Finningley for about a year, and then moved to Lyneham and continued my training on the Hercules as a loadmaster for about 6 months, and then moved on to the squadron. When I got back from the Falklands, it was straight into the Gulf crisis, ferrying troops and equipment out to the Gulf. I was 8 months pregnant at the time. I'd been to work that day, running the desk, and was fully intending to go back to work after I'd had my son, and gone home from work, had a bit of a headache, went to bed, woke up about 10 o'clock at night feeling completely disorientated and didn't really know what was going on. Realised there was something wrong, so I dialed 999 and got an ambulance. Couldn't quite remember where I lived, so luckily it had come up on the screen where the call was coming from. The ambulance came and got me, took me to hospital, and Gareth, my husband, was away in Dubai at the time, so I had to ring him from under the sheets in the hospital on my mobile phone, and he came home and they did a brain scan and realised I'd had a stroke. When I went to St Dunstans, it'd been about 8 months since I'd had my stroke and lost my sight, or lost half my sight. So I'd never really been given any guidance as to what to do or if I was doing the right things.
One of her main concerns or worries or whatever that became apparent to me when we were talking about things was the fact that it was her confidence was her worst enemy because it was at such a low ebb. And that's often the case with many people whose sight loss has been quite sudden.
I had problems reading because I've lost my right-hand vision. When I pick a book up, I can see the word and I can't see the word to the right of it. So his advice to me was to turn the book on the side and learn to read upwards, which was really useful and really simple, but nobody had ever said it to me before. Or he even said, turn it upside down and learn to read upside down. But since then, you know, I've used that and it's been really helpful. At St Dunstans, I met some fantastic people. The staff there were brilliant. There was Leslie and Ness and the PTI Grant. He was brilliant. But also it was really lovely to meet some of the St Dunstaners because it was really lovely to meet people who also had sight problems, not necessarily completely blind. There was a guy there called Matt, and he had exactly the same sight loss as I'd had. So it was really interesting to, compare notes, and he was just... he was incredible to talk to. He was so courageous.
When I went to Bosnia, it's the most beautiful land I've ever seen, very picturesque. And we used to get bombed quite regularly, and all we could do is run in the shelter. They were allowed to shoot back, have permission to shoot back. We were never allowed to. They said, because we part of the United Nations, so we weren't allowed to fight. And I was 3 days before my 21st birthday. And I was brain damage, which also affected my sight. When I went to St Dunstans, they basically taught me everything again, because my brain damage injury had made the whole of the right side of my body all paralysed, from the face down to my toes. Everything that side had been paralysed. And before my accident, I'd been very right-footed and very right-handed, and thought I could never use my left hand. So I'd been taught St Dunstans taught me how to use my left hand and left foot. Straight from the beginning, how to learn how to do everything again, even eat with a knife and fork, or eat with a fork, because that's all I can do now. So they taught me everything, how to write again, basically how to do everything, all the simple things in life, which I found hard. I got there 5 times a week, Monday through to Friday, In the mornings I train for fitness, because I still like to keep my fitness up, and hopefully I'll be doing marathons one day in a wheelchair. And in the afternoon I'm doing just making things, like I was doing pottery, making pottery things, I was doing woodwork, just making things for other people, which I enjoy doing.
The personal satisfaction I get from St Dunstans is seeing the achievements of the guys that come through that I work with, just seeing them succeed and to achieve some of the goals that they thought that they would never be able to achieve. I met Reg Perrin in 1993. Reg was a young Royal Marine that had been severely brain damaged in a grenade accident. Reg required an awful lot of physical and physiotherapy as part of his rehabilitation, as well as getting over his eye disorder. Reg again was a very, very determined young man and wasn't willing to sit back. And he's proved this through some of the amazing achievements that he's accomplished over the last few years. Reg and a team of lads actually climbed Mount McKinley, which is the highest peak in Alaska, and raised in the region of £50,000 as well, which was an amazing accomplishment. Reg actually risked his life and nearly lost his life during the climb, and had it not been for some of the guys that were accompanying him, we wouldn't have seen Reg again. Now Reg is taking up a more leisurely pursuit in that he's playing golf, one-handed golf that is, which again is a hell of an achievement for a young man that's paralysed down one side and almost blind. Steve Finley's a young Geordie lad with a debilitating illness that unfortunately he's not going to recover from, but he manages to get over it with his perseverance and just sheer determination.
The fact that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS commonly known, Headley Court found out that I was being discharged from the army, so they asked for me to be sent to them so they could evaluate me and the illness. The rehabilitation and training that I did at St Dunstans was helpful, big style. It's a place disabled people, blind people can go to and feel a part of everything. It gives you a feeling of achievement, and at the end of it, they'll recognise it themselves and say, well done.
Physical fitness acts as a release for the stress and the pent-up emotions and that the blindness creates and causes.
Well, when I'm windsurfing, me right leg, it goes into spasm, which stops me from standing still on a surfboard or a windsurfing board, which basically causes us to fall in the water. But I've found every now and again I can give myself a sort of a smack on the side of the leg, and it sort of kicks it back into thinking for itself, and I can get away for a few more minutes. I just try, and so nothing will ever stop me. But that's the way the army made me, and that's the way I'll stay. Nothing will ever change that.
Well, after I was wounded and did the 3.5 years in the prisoner of war camps, with all the deprivations that involved, it was absolutely great to come home to peace and freedom, all these things we'd longed for, we'd prayed for so much, to get home there with family and friends and some decent food to eat and radio to listen to. I'll say it was glorious. But after a little while, the newness, the novelty of those things wore off, as it often does with material things, of course, and I found myself getting really discontent. I was really down in the dumps. There I was, 26 years of age, 1946, absolutely no future whatsoever. War, it's finished now, and here I am. Total despair, really, until I went to St Dunstans. And that was my first connection with ex-service men, really. Well, it was, completely. Within a few days of being at St Dunstans, a new world, new horizons opened up for me completely. My family had been in the transport business before the war, and I talked to the commandant, as we called him at that time, Air Commodore Dacre, and he said, "Now, what about you, man? What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know anything. The only thing I know is transport." Well, let's have a go at that, shall we? I said, "Well, that'd be lovely." So anyway, the upshot was I got my own vehicle, a large one, and I was brought up to date with business management and bookkeeping and introduced to a few pre-war contacts and so on. And anyway, I established the business and I came home. I stayed at St Dunstans, what, about 9 months or so. Came home and got cracking with my own little business, which gave a little meaning and purpose to life. It gave me something to do. I didn't make much money, but it was there. It didn't matter. I was happy. Major achievements, I don't know, just keeping alive, keep going. I've done nothing remarkable, really. I've been lucky, principally because of my wife. She sort of pushed me along. Often I've been a bit slacked and a bit doubtful of my own, own ability and so on. But she's pushed me along, and I've found, more usefulness, more enjoyment than ever I thought possible.
Well, I first heard about St Dunstans when I was at home, and a welfare officer from St Dunstans came around to visit me and created an awareness of what St Dunstans was and what it could do for me. And I was invited down there, and I did go down for a weekend just to have a look, basically, and I stayed 9 months and did the rehab training. And they told me about the London to Brighton bike ride, and it just sounded up my street, so I took part in that, which was excellent. Raised 350 quid for St Dunstans, and I'm doing the London Marathon in April 2001, which I'm looking forward to. I'm training for that at the moment, to do myself some justice. So I'm not going there just to complete it, I'm going there to do well to myself. Without St Dunstans, I think I'd be in a much different place now, and I certainly wouldn't be as stable, I don't think, and as balanced as a person as I am. Yeah, as balanced an individual as I think I am now. And God, it offered such a lifeline initially. It's confusion and disorientation. I'm just fortunate that they were there, and they were there for me as they are there for other people as well in my situation.
When I first joined the Navy, I went through 7 or 8 weeks of basic training. And it was at that point, at the end of the basic training, I won the Rally Medal for coming top out of my group of new recruits. It took the doctors about 8 to 10 months to diagnose or to establish what was wrong with my eyesight and why it was failing.
Jamie Weller is a St Dunstaner who came to St Dunstans after a couple of years in the Navy. When he came, he was about 18. He didn't want to learn to touch type, but I convinced him that it would actually help him use a computer, and no matter what he did afterwards, he would need to use a computer. He got on extremely well. After St Dunstans, he went to a college where he took an access course which took him through maths and English. He discovered he liked doing maths. He took a basic maths exam and then thought he would go on to A-level, which he passed, and thought, well, why stop here? I might as well go on to university. He went on to university and got his degree and is now working as an accountant.
I got my results through, and I also got a letter through from the Institute saying that I was the first blind person to have passed exams and become a member. So I started Deloitte & Touche in September in September '95. It was, I think, the first year at work was quite a big shock to me. It was not because of the type of work I was doing, but really the emotions surrounding it, because all of my fellow colleagues, they just hadn't a clue about visual impairment and blindness. I always get this feeling when I go into a client meeting, and it does give me, I suppose I do feel quite pleased and proud when I sit down at the table, and they, you know, this guy my client I've spoken to over the telephone, he doesn't know me from, you know, he's never met me before, I've never met him, and I think they're quite shocked at first to think that I can do that job, but that does give me a great amount of satisfaction.
Strange thing about losing your sight is, as well as all the emotional adjustment, you take them back to infancy, you've got to learn to read and write again and get about. Simple tasks like getting about. And I took it on as a challenge in the autumn of 1982 into the winter of 83. And I think it was what could have been a bad part of my life was very good. I remember lying in the hospital bed in Hasler thinking, what are you going to do, never mind work, what are you going to do for your leisure pursuits? And I returned to what a lot of people would perceive as a childhood toy, as Meccano. And do quite a lot of model engineering Meccano. I've always been an enthusiast of records, and I still pursue tape recording on open reel tape. I have a couple of open reel recorders, and that allows me to enjoy music. One of my functions I do now is public speaking to a range of social groups. After my talks, I invite questions openly. The ones about visual impairment: do you think in colour? Have your other senses altered as if your hearing improved? How do you get around? I suppose there people are trying to put themselves in your shoes and transfer it to them, how it would affect them. And then, because an element of my talk it encompasses the Falklands War, my experiences there, people say, do you feel bitter? Do you think it was worth it? What would you do if an Argentinian walked into the room? And that's the sort of range of questions we get in that area as well.
I have the somewhat dubious distinction of being the only Falklands veteran in St Dunstans. 18 years later, ladies and gentlemen, I've stopped asking why me, but I must admit at the time, 20,000 soldiers and sailors went down to the South Atlantic. I was the only one who came back blind. It did cross my mind why me, and I'll say a bit about it if I may.
There's something about the Falklands War that 18 years later, people still think about it. Possibly it's because one of the first wars that the media, you know, the modern communication and the media brought it into people's living rooms.
In the early 1970s, St Dunstans Care was extended to include members of the emergency services, fire, ambulance, police, policemen just like Ken Moss, who came here for his rehabilitation and training. Ken Moss is a remarkable story. At the time of his accident, he was given just a 5% chance of survival. He was totally blinded in both eyes, his skull was crushed and both his legs were broken. He spent a considerable time at St Dunstans in rehabilitation and training, and then the remarkable thing is that he became the first ever man to set a solo world land speed record.
When I heard that Ken was attempting the land speed record solo, that was just unbelievable, that any blind person would attempt such a challenge. Although it didn't surprise me with Ken's motivation, it didn't surprise me that he would attempt something like that, but it was just an amazing challenge. But I knew that Ken would be up to something like that.
I was told that I would go into a deep depression after I'd lost my eyesight. My family were warned about it. I think with the aims I've had in my life has been the reason I've never ever gone into a depression. I've always enjoyed life to the full, and anybody out there can do the same thing. There's no reason, just because you've lost your sight or any other handicap, that you've got to feel as though you're a second-class citizen. You're the same as anybody else.
The objective of St Dunstans is to enable our blind ex-servicemen and women to lead an independent and as fulfilling a life as possible. What a lot of people don't realise is that St Dunstans is neither lottery funded nor does it receive government funding. It relies entirely on public generosity. and every year the cost of care and rehabilitation and training goes up.
The personal satisfaction that I get working with the guys is to see them achieve the things that they thought they would never be able to achieve again, having lost their sight. It's a wonderful thing to see a person that was able to ride a horse, get on a horse as a blind man. And what I tend to do with sighted people is to tell them to try these things, try running with your eyes closed, try sitting on a horse with your eyes closed and see how you feel when it's very, very hard. And for these guys to do that, some of them are very, very brave lads.
I do. I really do like it here at St Dunstans. It's given me so much more independence and it's given me something to live for again. Whereas before, I just thought that I was going to sit down and vegetate. But now, I want to be out here, there and everywhere. The amount of things that I've been doing, it just I wouldn't have dreamed possible. But it's all come true. It's like a dream have come true.
If you were to ask me what advice I could give to somebody who had just lost their sight, I would say don't give up hope. It's still the same maxim. The more you put into life, the more you get out of life, and that applies just as much to a blind person as it does to a sighted. And we St Dunstans have the added advantage, of course, of being members of a very, very special family, and that does really count for so much.